Well, I got to see a rare book which reproduces a ancient book, and of course I'm going to show it to you, mostly just for the fun at looking at these medieval manuscript images of medical procedures. The original was made in France in the 13th century. You can see the title here. I'm not going to try to pronounce it. A lot of the images apparently involve a figure known as Roger of Salerno, a famous doctor of the time. Speaking of doctors, here's one from the general Dallas area, and this apparently was his copy. I love that this sticks around with this volume. So as a member of this particular, medical professional society, he got one of these copies, one of only 2,800 made. And that was done in 1977. And as the book said, the plates for this were made from the original manuscript held in the British Library in London. Being a product of its time, the visuals always start with something from the Bible, not something you would see in a medical visual text today, of course. I love medieval manuscripts. They're really amazing to look at. Of course, I can't read what's on the page there, but I enjoy this kind of a thing. Just imagine the effort it took to produce something like this. So here's what I was talking about. On that top row, you see biblical scenes, including the birth of Christ, right? You can see the manger up in the upper right, and then right below that, a man having his head opened up in a medieval medical procedure. I know that wasn't meant to be humorous by the creators of the book, but, it's an important work. Yeah, it's kind of funny when you look back now, just an odd juxtaposition. And that's the pattern that repeats throughout all the pages, but we're just going to look at highlights. Speaking of highlights, the guy getting his head opened up is one of them, so let's do some close-ups here. This is what we're really here for. It looks very painful. I like how the patient is just sitting there, kneeling, sitting, while his head gets opened up and a section of it replaced. Of course, this was long before anesthesia. I enjoy, thinking about the past a lot. I'd love to visit it if I could, but I'm very glad for modern medical science. Germ theory, of course, was not really a thing at this point, so you have to wonder what the success rate was with procedures like this. But then again, there's evidence of ancient brain surgery being successfully done in South America. Here's the top row from another page. So biblical scene. Over on the right, we see a soldier who should probably not be allowed to hold a baby. I assume that's the story from King Solomon. Here's another one from along the top. Clearly the temptation of Christ in the wilderness, followed by the scene from the rooftop, also part of the temptation. I love medieval art. Sometimes the devil is way stranger than is as depicted here. But back to what caught my attention about this book in the first place. I do a lot of content about weapons, so here we go. This guy definitely needs to see a doctor, so it's a good thing that he's in front of one. And if you watch my channel, then you know that that is probably not an arrow sticking out of the man's neck, but a feathered spear or javelin. Why do the patients always have to kneel in front of the doctor? I mean, this man should be lying down. Another biblical interlude. I like the color and the art on the scene of Judas here. Not even Roger of Salerno was going to be able to help him now. Here's another battle scar. This guy managed to walk away from a scrape with a spear through his arm. He gets to stand up, but either way, that looks extremely painful. Man to the left has a grotesque wound on his left shoulder. He seems to be taking it pretty well as he points it out to the doctor. I love the placid looks on everybody's faces. It's like they're talking about the weather or something. Here's some different bone setting techniques, it seems like. I definitely wince at the one on the left as a guy who's dislocated his shoulder 13 times, my right one from rugby and martial arts. The one in the middle does not look like it's without pain either, but kind of practical. Interesting to see some of these old techniques. I mean, I guess it makes sense. You'd have to find a way to get things back into place. This one looks absolutely horrible, of course. I have no idea what's going on. But yikes, that's the kind of thing that's just littered throughout these illustrations. Now here's another man coming out of a dust-up. He's suffering even worse than the first fight victim we looked at. But if you think he's in bad shape, just look at the man to his right. He's split open stem to stern. I don't think his outlook is good at all. And that leads us to a couple of more men. Of course, it's always men, right? Interestingly, that was actually a problem with the history of medicine. Regardless, we have these comically horrible scenes. I would hate to see a photograph of either of these actual conditions. But yeah, people were tough as nails back then, apparently. And that'll do it. Just a fun little romp through this. Very interesting to see the state of medicine. at that time and how things are visually described. Here's a medieval doctor's office, and we will close out with that. So next time you have to go to the doctor's office, be grateful you live in the 21st century.